Welcome to the Technical Writing Success video overview by Kurt Robbins.
All right, let's dive right in, because we're starting with what is, for many, a really shocking pivot from Bill Gates. For years, he was one of the world's most prominent voices warning us about a coming climate disaster. But recently, his tune has changed a lot.
And you can see that shift crystal clear right here. On the left, that's from his 2021 book. He's calling it one of the greatest challenges ever. But now, look at the right. His new take is that, yeah, it's serious, but it's not going to be the end of humanity. We're talking about a massive transformation in his message in just a few short years, and it's caught a lot of people by surprise.
So, you're probably asking, what's really behind this change? Well, he laid it all out in a recent memo, framing his points as his tough truths about climate. And it's really a total reframing of both the problem and how we should solve it.
He kind of boils it down to three core ideas. First, he's saying, look, the doomsday talk isn't helping, even though the problem is real. Second, he's starting to question if our obsession with temperature targets is really the best way to measure success. And third, and this is the big one, this is the heart of his whole pivot, he argues that the best defense against climate change is to improve human health and prosperity right now.
And this quote, wow, it just cuts right to the heart of his new priority. He's laying out this incredibly stark choice. Do we spend our resources on an immediate life and death crisis like malaria, or on a longer-term climate goal? For him, the answer now is all about stopping the human suffering that's happening today. So this is Gates's new call to action. He's not saying we should ignore climate change. Instead, he's arguing that by making people in the world's poorest countries healthier, wealthier, and more prosperous, we're actually building up the resilience so they can better handle the impacts of a warming world.
Okay, now here's where things get really interesting. Gates' new stance actually seems to line up with what public opinion data has been telling us for decades, particularly in the US. Turns out, his move away from a doomsday scenario kind of reflects how a lot of people have felt for a long time.
Just take a look at the numbers here. This chart shows the percentage of Americans who say they're greatly worried about climate change. After 35 years of campaigns and warnings, that number has barely budged. It was 40% a quarter century ago, and it's still 40% today. The dire warnings just haven't sunk in any deeper.
And get this, when you ask Americans to name the single most important issue facing the country, climate change consistently polls at a tiny 2%. 2. It's usually way down the list, like 15th or 20th, far behind things like the economy or healthcare.
This perception gap is so important for understanding Gates' new argument. The huge majority of people just don't see climate change as an immediate, personal threat to their own lives, which really helps explain why all the doomsday messaging hasn't really landed. So, as you can imagine, a pivot this big from one of the world's most influential figures has just unleashed a firestorm of debate. And the reactions, well, they're all over the map, from high praise to some really sharp criticism. On one side, you have commentators who are basically welcoming him with open arms. They see this as a return to reality, a pragmatic step that prioritizes goals we can actually achieve to help people now instead of what they see as just alarmism. But on the other side of the coin, a lot of climate scientists and folks at the UN are saying, hold on a second. They argue Gates is creating a false choice. They're warning that if we take our eye off the ball with emissions, the climate disasters that follow will wipe out decades of progress and hurt the very same poor people Gates says he wants to help. And then, of course, there's the more cynical take. Some people are suggesting this isn't about some intellectual change of heart. They think it's a calculated move, that Gates is just adjusting to a new political reality to protect his massive investments in energy-hungry tech like AI and data centers.
So, look, whether you think he's right or completely wrong, there's no denying what Bill Gates has done here. He's forced a central, nagging conflict in the climate conversation right out into the open, putting a giant spotlight on the question of what we should actually do first.
And here is that conflict, laid out right next to each other. On the one hand, you have urgent mitigation, the idea that we have to throw everything we have at hitting emissions targets to stop a future catastrophe. And on the other, pragmatic adaptation, the argument that we should focus our resources on helping people adapt to the changes that are already here.
And that leaves all of us with the critical question at the very heart of this whole debate. Has Bill Gates just shown us a smarter, more effective path forward, or is he creating a dangerous distraction that pulls our attention away from a true planetary emergency? Thanks so much for watching. If you found this overview helpful, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to the Technical Writing Success YouTube channel. And hey, don't forget to like, comment, and share. It really helps us reach a wider audience.